Time for us, for the first time in 2023, to go to the Farm Bureau guest line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau. Our friend David Cobb from CBS Sports. He's batting leadoff for the year. David, what's up, my man? Happy New Year.
I had no idea. I'm honored. So when Borky texted me and presented me with two time options earlier, I'm glad I chose this one so I can be the leadoff man. You know, no pressure or anything.
And it's not like we laid around and didn't do anything yesterday. We were just no guests yesterday. There was so much football to talk about, and that's what I want to talk to you about primarily as well. And what a treat this weekend was in terms of the college football playoff semifinals. Maybe punched a few holes in those people that are like, blowouts only. We can't go to a 12-team playoff. I don't know. Maybe we don't even need to revel in that. Maybe we just need to revel in the glorious day that we had on Saturday with Michigan, TCU, and then Georgia, Ohio State.
It was amazing. By far the best slate of college football playoff semifinals that we've had. I didn't have the courage to pick TCU straight up. I picked them against the spread. I knew they would keep it closer against Michigan than people expected, but I just didn't have the courage to go all the way and say, hey, they would win straight up. And you know what? That's who they've been all year. They've been underdogs on numerous occasions now and have found a way to get it done. And just an insane game. And then Georgia, I mean, honestly, I didn't think Georgia played very well until the last 10 minutes of that game. And that was enough. And I feel so bad for CJ Stroud, honestly. It's hard to feel bad for Ohio State as a program. They're an advantaged program, a privileged program, if you want to put it that way. But I do feel bad for CJ Stroud because the fact that he and Bryce Young are going to leave college football without a single national title between them is just stunning. And the fact is, here we are with Stetson Bennett on the cusp of winning two as a player who's, perhaps not quite nearly as talented as those guys. That's wild to me. But man, what a day! What a day! It was fantastic.
It really is incredible what you said, and I actually hadn't thought about that. Neither C.J. Stroud nor Bryce Young is going to win a national champion as a quarterback in college football at two blue blood programs that are used to winning and winning at a really big clip. And maybe even more stunning that there are people that like Will Levis more than either of those two when it comes to the NFL draft. Go figure that.
Yeah, Borky had a good tweet on that I retweeted the other night. Ridiculous. I just don't get it. Like what the infatuation is with Will Levis. And that's a rabbit hole that I could go down, and you might not get me back from that. But yeah, in terms of quarterback play, it is wild that those two are going to go down without national titles. And let me be clear, by no fault of their own. I mean, C.J. Stroud was magnificent in that game, and Bryce Young was phenomenal all year long. And I think just defended his Heisman Trophy as well as he could, given the circumstances. And yet here we are with Max Duggan, who was benched to start the season, going up against Stetson Bennett, a former walk-on and JUCO guy in the national title.
We didn't really explore this yesterday, but I did just throw it out there as something to ponder. Given what we've seen from Georgia's defense in the last two games, they give up 41 to Ohio State, and they're a field goal from being at home watching the national championship game that, kind of got snapped left. And LSU with 500 yards passing. And I know a lot of it was irrelevant yards in the SEC championship game, but it happened. I mean, we saw it with our own eyes. Are we crazy if we're not closely looking at TCU and what TCU has done offensively and believing that, okay, this TCU team is going to score, and therefore 13 is a lot of points in the championship game?
Yeah, that's a big ask for the Georgia offense, potentially. Look, TCU averaged over 6 yards per carry against Michigan, and that's with Kendre Miller, their star running back, missing a large portion of that game due to injury. And they've got depth at that position. DeMarcado was, phenomenal filling in. At the end of the day, though, the TCU offense is stout. They don't have many holes. I mean, Quentin Johnston, I think, is one of the best wide receivers in the country. He might be the best wide receiver in the country. He was banged up for a large part of this season. And maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jalen Hyatt and those guys cleaned up a little better in the postseason hardware. But if you're talking about an NFL draft prospect and just game-changing wide receiver, Quentin Johnston's right there. So this TCU offense is legit. You're right. There's some holes in that Georgia defense. Georgia's defense really wasn't tested a whole lot during the regular season, and Ohio State passed the ball quite effectively against them for most of that game.
David, so I'm not going to ask you to take into account the Gasparilla Bowl or the New Mexico Bowl or the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl, but going from Wednesday or Thursday I'd say let's start Wednesday because that's when we had the crazy game with Arkansas, Kansas. That was Texas Tech's win over Ole Miss. That through the end of the Rose Bowl yesterday, what letter grade would you give to bowl season for those games?
I'd give it a solid A minus. There were some duds in there, but honestly, the one that put it over the top for me is the Cotton Bowl yesterday, and Tulane storming back from a 15-point deficit in the final 4 minutes of the game to beat USC. Just an absurd comeback for that team, and what a turnaround for the program. I mean, we talked all year about the turnaround that USC made, and rightfully so. It was really impressive to go from 4-8 to 11 wins under Lincoln Riley in year one. But Tulane, man, to go from 2-10 to Cotton Bowl champions as a Group of 5 program that really didn't have much recent history to draw upon. Unreal job there. And you got to wonder, too, this is an overlooked aspect, I think, of Tulane winning that game yesterday. If Willie Fritz takes the Georgia Tech job, I don't think there's any way that Tulane pulls that off and beats USC. And so that's a little minute storyline, right? Like, you know what? He could have gone on to Georgia Tech and taken that Power 5 job at age 63 in the twilight of his career, the pinnacle of the sport for some coaches. But he chose to stay back and coach Tulane for that last game. And honestly, I feel like in the long run, he's going to look back on that decision with a lot of pride because he elevated Tulane football to heights it hadn't seen since before World War II. And when you get storylines like that in college football, to me, it overrides some of the duds or less exciting games. You know, the 63-7 LSU over Purdue game that wasn't much fun to watch.
I suppose that and Iowa, Kentucky. When you take in those two games, it's impossible to give it an A+. I might even go solid A and not even put the minus out there. I want to pose a question to you that comes from Chase in Columbus. He goes, my sports New Year's resolution is to stop explaining my negative views on playoff expansion. Instead, I pose a question. Take this example. Depending on seeding, you could very reasonably have had 3, if not 4, SEC teams in the Final Four. How many years of the SEC getting 3 into the Final Four until everyone starts banging the drum for the next thing? We're talking about after the 12-team playoff. And when they do, what will that next thing be?
Look, I don't know that the SEC is going to be just so hands down dominant in this thing like he expects. This year in particular, after Georgia, I don't know that there was another team in the SEC this year that was better than Michigan.
But he's saying in a 12-team playoff where you play your way through that bracket and you end up with a Final Four that includes 3 or 4, based on what we saw in the bowl games. I mean, right? So Georgia might advance. We could see Alabama advancing. We could see LSU advancing. Maybe you end up with 3 out of a 12-team playoff.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think the road to get there is going to make it entertaining enough, right? Like the SEC's been fairly dominant during the 4-team era. We're expanding it to 12 and at least giving teams a chance, right? Because I think the complaint a lot of times with that 4-team bracket or format has been that the SEC gets the benefit of the doubt and the SEC gets more teams in than maybe it should sometimes. And then maybe we ought to be looking harder at a TCU, a Cincinnati, giving a team like Tulane a shot. At least there's going to be opportunity now for some of these other programs to show us what they can do. And look, there's more parity, I think, right now in college football than there has been in the last 10 years. You go back to last season, Cincinnati reaches the playoff as a Group of 5 team. We see Tulane break through for a huge bowl victory this season. And TCU, the ultimate Cinderella, reaching the national title game. So I don't think the SEC is going anywhere, but the Alabama dynasty is over. And Georgia might be stepping in to fill those shoes. But I think the 12-team playoff, my opinion, on the whole, is that it'll be good for the sport because there's going to be more access. Pac-12 is going to be in. The Group of 5 is going to be in. And then, whoever the Big 12 and ACC produce, we'll see. But if it was a year like this, hey, TCU's playing for the national title.
20 seconds left. Are you ready to say that the Big 12 is going to be fine? Even with losing Texas and OU?
It's going to be great from a basketball standpoint, and I'm sure we'll get into that over the coming weeks. It ain't going to drop off a bit on the hoop side. Football, it's still going to be a really compelling league because the teams they're adding are good, fun football programs. The Big 12 was the best league to watch this year, and I don't think that'll change, even if they drop off from a competitive standpoint just a bit.
David Cobb from CBS Sports. Always enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for your time. Happy New Year.